Thanks, Sandra.
All right, let's bring in Democratic Florida Congressman Jared Moskowitz. He serves on the House Oversight and Foreign Affairs Committee. Sir, thank you very much for joining us. We had that Harvard student on last hour who just had some remarkable things to say about what these students are going through and what they continue to go through. This was a threat from a professor on his campus that he described right here.
There was a staff member at Harvard who's been there for 26 years who threatened me with a machete, saying he wanted to fight and bring down the Zionist mafia. To this day, Harvard has not once acknowledged to me or told me his employment status, whether he has access to campus. It is inconceivable that any other minority group would be treated with such disdain and contempt.
As shocking as that is, Congressman, there are so many stories like this happening. Why is this continuing?
No, thanks for having me. Thanks for focusing on this. It's disgusting. Harvard, mismanaged this from the very beginning when this started many months ago, which is why the president had to resign. Same thing at UPenn. And we've seen the debacle at Columbia. It's time for that president also to be gone and to resign or to be fired. So this is something that is unacceptable. I'm happy that my Republican colleagues on the Hill are having hearings on this and keeping this in the spotlight. The Jewish community appreciates that. We know that there's a double standard here. We know if they were saying stuff about minority groups, this wouldn't have gotten past brunch on the first day. But for Jews, it's always free speech. One of the things I haven't seen, which I find interesting, is everyone has a right to protest in this country, and we should protect that, of course. Yeah. But I've not seen any of these protesters come forward and say, hey, those guys over there that are saying the Jews should go back to Poland or kill all the Zionists, they're not with us. Where's that guy? Where's that protester who says, no, I'm here to fight for justice or against the war, whatever they want to protest. But the folks over there that are spewing anti-Semitism, they're not with us.
Yeah, well, it's all kind of intermingled at this point. Wanted to ask you about this other pressing issue, and that is a report that the Biden administration has allegedly told Israel that it will give them sensitive intelligence on Hamas tunnels and the whereabouts, potential whereabouts of some Hamas leaders like Yahya Sinwar if Israel pledges not to go into Rafah. In the last hour, we talked with the former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Oren, about it. Here's what he said.
If somebody knows where the leaders are using the hostages as human shields, so they know where the hostages are. And I couldn't believe that anybody would use this as leverage in order to advance any policy. I understand the administration's problems with the Rafah operation. I understand Israel's need to continue that operation. But using human shields, hostages, to me was completely indefensible.
In a statement to Fox News, a National Security Council spokesperson had an ambiguous statement that we're not withholding anything. But if the U.S. is withholding intelligence on the whereabouts of secret Hamas tunnels and its leaders and trying to make a deal, a lot of people would say for votes in Michigan, how does that sit with you?
Well, first, I don't believe that to be accurate. I've not heard that from any of the folks that I talked to within the Israeli government through the ambassador's office. We've not heard that at all. We've seen the reporting. Obviously, if the reporting were to be true, then obviously that not only doesn't sit well with me, then obviously we're betraying an ally and we're betraying the hostage families. But I don't think that information is accurate. I believe the Biden administration and the Israeli government are doing everything they can to get those hostages back. Although obviously that was one of the reasons I had issues with the decision last week with the Biden administration pausing a particular weapon. It wasn't the pause on the particular weapon. It was that we must increase pressure on Hamas. The reason why we don't have a ceasefire, the reason why innocent Palestinians are still potentially in harm's way is because Hamas is using them as human shields, and Hamas won't agree to a ceasefire. And by the way, if Sinwar is never going to agree to the ceasefire, the leader of Hamas, because he wants to sacrifice every Palestinian, then the Biden administration needs to tell that to the American people. So these people in the streets that are chanting on behalf of Hamas, they can hear how Sinwar and Hamas are willing to let it all go and are never going to give back the hostages.
Yeah, Congressman, as far as the politics involved that may or may not be involved, Rick Gonell sent out a tweet to that effect, if all of this is indeed the case. What do you believe is the political impact on the president's reelection campaign as this war continues?
Well, look, Joe Biden has been an absolute champion of Jewish people, not just as president, not just as vice president, but in the Senate, right? He's fought anti-Semitism his whole life. You're talking about someone who established the first ambassador on anti-Semitism. You're talking about someone who established the anti-Semitism coalition to get a definition. By the way, also, I'll give credit to President Trump establishing the Abraham Accords. That was a big deal for the state of Israel. But this administration has done a good job supporting Israel and supporting the Jewish people. I think the president is doing what he thinks is right, and I think he's have to deal with the politics fall wherever they may. I don't like, obviously, President Trump going out and telling the Jewish community that if you vote Democrat, somehow you're a bad Jew. We appreciate it, Mr. President, but maybe don't have dinner with Nick Fuentes. So like everyone right now, obviously, is trying to posture because we live in that political season. Obviously, there's things I differ with the Biden administration on how they've messaged and some of the decisions they've made on Israel. But I think the last 6 months, the Biden administration has stood by Israel and has stood by the Jewish community. And we're appreciative of what President Biden did, obviously, with his speech on anti-Semitism on the anniversary of the Holocaust.
Let me come back to what you said a moment ago about Hamas's leadership and Biden. And you said that if Yahya Sinwar is not willing to sign on to a ceasefire, which it looks like he's not at this point, at least not one that would be acceptable to Israel, then Biden needs to call that out. Biden and Israel have proven that Iran, who is the biggest benefactor to Hamas, is a toothless tiger, at least until it gets a nuclear weapon. Then the game changes. So why doesn't Biden simply say to Hamas, unconditional surrender, lay down your weapons, release the hostages, and make that message clear to the people of America?
No, listen, I think what Jake Sullivan said from the podium in the press secretary's office at the White House a couple of days ago on how the reason there's no ceasefire is because of Hamas, and also there's no genocide. That's a complete lie. As we know, obviously, the UN quietly lowered their numbers on the death of women and children. They tried to hide that, of course. So there is absolutely no genocide going on. By the way, there's a terrible genocide going on in Darfur. We don't talk about that because apparently there's no Jews there. But at the end of the day, if the Biden administration has concluded that Sinwar is not going to release the hostages, right, and he thinks he's winning the PR war, okay, because of what's going on in this country, then yeah, the Biden administration should come forward and tell the American people, these guys are the reason there's not a ceasefire and there is no genocide going on. That is an absolute lie, and it's being told because all they want to do is undermine the existence of the state of Israel.
Congressman Jared Moskowitz, always appreciate your time, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.